Well, hello everyone. I was handed a video by The Living Dinosaur entitled Holy Hallucinations 31, which was an emotional, irrational, hate-filled tirade against my person, allegedly in response to my Crevo rant number 71, The Population Problem, where I simply made the point that the world population is way too small for the evolutionary timescale and did indeed fit well with the biblical timescale. The Living Dinosaur, whom I will sometimes refer to as Dino for short, really didn't even touch my argument and instead went in way over his head in commentary that was full of astonishing, glaring errors. Now, originally, I didn't even think the video was worthy of a response. In fact, I'm still not so sure it is, just because the errors were so simple and so glaring. However, multiple atheists sent me this video. Apparently, Dino was not the only one to not see the glaring errors. So I'm making this response, and I'm going to close with a challenge to The Living Dinosaur, as well as all YouTubers. The script for this video will be available right there. Now, Dino, in the words of the Newfoundlanders, calm down! Good grief, man! You're gonna have an aneurysm! I'm amazed at your anger and vitriolic hatred. I mean, you lost sleep over this, I can tell. But what blows me away is the things you were angry about the most were things that were not even true. You made a very long string of slanderous accusations that were completely unfounded, and you would have known this if you had even taken just a moment to get to know me. This, combined with your glaring ignorance on the very issues you brought up, just blows me away. I'm even further shocked that apparently none of your viewers spotted your glaring errors, and I wonder why. Now, in his video, Dino said, and before I continue, I also wanted to point out that while you seem to have no problems in expecting deserts and wastelands to be capable of sustaining hordes of human beings, I strongly suspect that you'd quickly change your tune after a couple of weeks in the Sonoran Desert, living off skunk poo and cactus spines took its toll in that eau de benign physique of yours. And is it now, booby? Well, now we'll go on to see what kind of plops of wisdom you're planning to excrete in a minute, but let me again take a moment to remind you about what my 10-year-old already knows. Available land area makes absolutely, expletive deleted, all difference to population size if other resources are limiting, you ignorant tard. Of course, as we'll find out later, your sickly, stunted mind is actually vaguely aware of this fact, so you're either deliberately lying about it, actively ignoring it, or dismissing it out of hand because it's somewhat inconvenient to the ludicrous excuse for an argument that you're in the process of squeezing out. And thus, only seconds into the video, Dino makes his first huge, glaring blunder. I'm astounded that Dino didn't think this through. And even more astounded that apparently none of his viewers ever noticed this glaring error either. I wrote to a young man in Arizona and asked him to comment. Harrison replied, I'm 15 and I think anyone is capable of living in the Sonora Desert. I've lived here for 14 years and suffered no side effects. Apparently the Living Dinosaur is unaware that there are millions of people living in the desert. The Sonoran in particular. They even have internet access. Have you never heard of Phoenix, Tucson, and all the little suburbs in between? Ever heard of Las Vegas, Nevada? All of these cities were built because enormous amounts of people were successfully living in the desert. And before you start spouting off about modern technology and conveniences, may I remind you that Phoenix was incorporated as a city in 1881. And if Fauci in 49 is such an expert at archaeology, why did he not inform you of the Native Americans who were living right there in the Sonoran Desert quite successfully long before white man came along and built cities? The Native Americans actually dug irrigation canals and were raising crops in the middle of the desert, which you are saying is inhospitable. In fact, apparently you're not aware that you can go and pick your own apples and pears right there in the Sonoran Desert at Agua Linda Farms. In 2004, Arizona produced 261,354 metric tons of desert durum, wheat. Guess where they grew it? As the name implies, the desert. That's an average of 6,031 pounds of wheat per acre of growing land in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. In fact, just about anywhere you go where it is allegedly inhospitable, people have been thriving for thousands of years quite successfully. Yes, even the high Arctic. In response to my comments about the human population bottleneck at the time of Noah and the flood, the Living Dinosaur responded, for example, Hawks and colleagues have concluded that the currently available genetic, anatomical, and archaeological data preclude any possibility of a pre-Pleistocene human population bottleneck, much less one of only 8 promiscuous camel fanciers less than 5,000 years ago. Of course, I'm sure that none of this matters to a delusional numbnut who's decided to place his stock in the ramblings of a long-dead tribal shaman rather than in the proven track record of modern science. Again, obviously wading in way over his head, the Living Dinosaur has not done his homework and has made a brazenly erroneous statement which is not difficult to shoot down. As Dr. Robert Carter pointed out in a very easy-to-access website, Carter documents some of the evidence in one easy-reading article as well as multiple technical articles. Nelson wrote on this matter back in 2004. He made use of the various mutation and variation processes, which are well known to make his point about evidence for a genetic bottleneck in humans, which was consistent with the flood account and timeline. Ironically, Nelson was 14 when he wrote that paper. So why is it a 14-year-old, writing 8 years ago, seemed to know more about the subject than the Living Dinosaur does now? Let us also not forget the very significant point that Dr. Jonathan Sanford elaborated on in his book, Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome, which I also explained in Crevo Rant number 78, The Boat That Don't Float. Genetic entropy shows that not only are we deteriorating, the exact opposite of evolution, it also shows that we could not have been around for millions of years, as evolution proposes, because we are deteriorating too quickly. The population of the Earth also shows just how young it is. Dino went on. Secondly, you neglected to explain why this unfettered human population growth that you're describing, when applied to the remaining members of the animal kingdom, hasn't left us all wading knee-deep in aardvarks, earwigs, koalas, and kestrels. Could it be that you didn't think of that, booby? Or that you just don't think at all, dumb expletive deleted? Or could it be that you, Dino, didn't know your own glaring ignorance, or that you just contradicted yourself? The whole point of my rant that you were responding to was that the population was too small for it to be millions of years old. So, thank you for reinforcing my point while simultaneously shooting yourself in the foot. With regards to the animals, apparently you once again missed the glaringly obvious answer as to why we are not overrun with aardvarks. The answer to which will become a theme consistent throughout the rest of this video. An answer to which you are already unastonishingly unaware of. We do find ridiculous animal populations. Let's take a look at one more piece analysis of the various populations he discussed in his paper, The Antediluvian Biosphere and Its Capability, written in 1986. Compare this impossible density with known densities, in individuals per hectare, of some modern reptiles. 889 iguanid lizards, a few thousand to 110,000 anoles and other small lizards, 548 colubrid snakes, 10,000 Manchuria island pit vipers, 1,235 Colorado rattlesnakes, 480 rhynchocephalian tuateras, or 570 pond turtles. One study in Morocco documented an estimated 2,950 lizards per hectare. And another study in northern Spain estimated 1,327 to 1,574 lizards per hectare. The moose is not native to Newfoundland. It was introduced in 1878 as one bull and one cow. Today there is an estimated 120,000 moose, and they are a dangerous pest on the island now. Why isn't the number bigger? One major factor: people. People are the reason animal populations are controlled. Hunting, overhunting, extermination, wars, and yes, even ecological abuse by humans. And that's the second thing that angered me. Considering that you look like you're seldom more than an arm's length away from a bacon double cheeseburger, you have some, expletive deleted, nerve to talk about there being no global food supply problem. Really, booby? Really? What kind of selfish, egotistical, self-centered, expletive deleted, who by the looks of it gorges daily on triple Macau burger supersized meals, topped with an extra helpings of saturated fat, has the nerve to put out his, expletive deleted, videos, smiling his smug, I'm all right Jack smile, and thinking that everyone in the world is as lucky as he is? Well, I can answer that for you, booby. The answer, it seems, is a fundamentalist creationist Christian. So while you might think that you're defending your religion, I have some news for you. All you're doing is showing the world how worthless your particular version of God is making you a better person, and how effective it is at making you a worthless, crusty skid mark on the gusset of humanity. You're no better than the countless other avaricious, alleged Jesus-loving, God-fearing, mother, expletive deleted, whose only real concern is in trying to grab as much of the pie for themselves while simultaneously giving not one, expletive deleted, for those who are unfortunate enough to have no pie at all. Of course, this is where the living dinosaur really went off the rails. Not only did he show his own ignorance of the subject matter, he also revealed his hypocrisy. You see, Dino, you know nothing about me. If you had even taken but a second to get to know me, you would have saved yourself the embarrassment of hurling false and slanderous accusations. I am a member of Youth with a Mission, a global missions organization which is involved in relief efforts around the world. I have actually been on the front lines bringing food to desperate people and have shed many tears over those dying of hunger. I live on about $15,000 a year, considered the poverty line here in Canada. I live in my van regularly, willingly sacrificing to keep expenses down, and yet, even with all of that, I still give money to the poor and needy, including funding relief efforts to starving people around the world. Your comments betray you, Dino. You have no idea why there are starving people in the world. The reason you do not know is because you have obviously never attempted to even lift a finger to help starving people in the world. What atheist organization have you supported who is out there feeding the hungry? Have you been on the front lines risking your life trying to bring food to starving people in Africa? I can tell you haven't. Because if you had, you would know better than to say the things you did. In the meantime, you sit at home producing hate-filled internet videos criticizing people like me over starving people when I'm actually out there doing something about starving people. I wonder how many people starved to death because you did not put any time or money into saving them. Instead of holding out your hand and giving to their need, you simply pointed a finger at them and yelled, "Aha! See? Aha!" as they died of hunger. With your other finger, you point in false accusation and criticism at others like myself who are actually holding out their hand and giving to the needy as they can. Shame on you. Shame on you. But let me enlighten all of you, because it appears the majority of your viewers are also desperately ignorant on this matter. Seeing as how you only seem to consider me an expert in food, then let's talk about food. In 1997, the American Association for the Advancement of Science reported a study where they found that 78% of the world's malnourished children live in countries which are food exporters. Clearly, this starvation had absolutely nothing to do with the lack of food. According to Fruit Ninja, California alone produces 1 billion pounds of strawberries every year. Seem like a stretch? It isn't a stretch at all. In 1 acre of farmland in one summer, you can produce 11,000 pounds of spinach, or 19,400 pounds of carrots, or 15,200 pounds of potatoes, or 9,100 pounds of lettuce, or 6,200 pounds of corn. The numbers really go through the roof when you get to fruit, as you can produce over 25,000 pounds of apples in 1 acre of land in one growing season, or over 31,000 pounds of peaches. California alone in 1992 produced 400,050 tons of apples, 4,875,000 tons of grapes. In Minnesota, where growing rice is very difficult, farmers still cultivate between 4,000 and 6,000 pounds of rice per acre. In California, farmers can produce 8,000 pounds of rice per acre. When I said we haven't even scratched the surface of Earth's natural resources, I wasn't kidding, nor was I speaking in ignorance, contrary to what you seem to think. Let's go with 7 billion people in the world. If you eat 5 pounds of food per day, you will become overweight. 5 pounds per day, 7 billion people, 365 days, is about 12,775,000,000,000 pounds of food per year needed to feed the whole world. Now let's pick a middle-of-the-road crop yield of 12,000 pounds of food per acre to build a baseline. And let's use the continental U.S. for growing land, approximately 2 1,425,600,000 acres. But let's do as you suggested. Let's write off 40% of that land as unusable. An unreasonably high number, but I want to make a point. That leaves 1,455,360,000 acres of land, and at 12,000 pounds per acre, that's 17,464,320,000,000 pounds of food that can be grown. That small an area can produce 137% of the food needed to sustain our present population. In fact, let's take a look at actual annual food production figures. Notice that at about 13.5 trillion pounds of food, we are already well over the required quantity of food, and notice what I have left out of the list: meats, fish, and a lot of different vegetables, nuts, and many common fruits. You can start to see why the organization Food First said, "Abundance, not scarcity, best describes the world's food supply. Enough wheat, rice, and other grains are produced to provide every human being with 3,500 calories a day. That doesn't even count many other commonly eaten foods: vegetables, beans, nuts, root crops, fruits, grass-fed meats, and fish. Enough food is available to provide at least 4.3 pounds of food per person a day worldwide. 2.5 pounds of grain, beans, and nuts, about a pound of fruits and vegetables, and nearly another pound of meat, milk, and eggs, enough to make most people fat. The problem is that many people are too poor to buy readily available food. Even most hungry countries have enough food for their people right now. Many are net exporters of food and other agricultural products." Which now leads us to the real reason why there are starving people in the world. Other people are the reason. You see, Dino, if you had actually taken the time you used up to make your rancid, hate-filled, vitriolic videos, and instead went out and volunteered with a relief organization attempting to feed starving people, you would know all of this. I'd like to see you a part of that team that is transporting trucks of food to the most hard-hit places of starving people, only to get held up at gunpoint by militia who take all the food. My peoples, those Christians to whom you poured out so much hate, that's the risks they take to reach these needy people, while you sit in comfort and accuse them of being in it for the money. During the Somali famine of 2011, multiple organizations had shipping containers full of food, trying to get it to the starving people. The government would not allow aid into the country. Most hungry people are surrounded by food and simply cannot afford to buy any. People are the reason there are starving people in the world, you know. People are the problem. People disobeying God's very clear instructions scattered throughout the entire Bible. Now, look, in spite of your emotional, horribly wrong, personal ad hominem attack on myself, I don't hate you. In fact, I'm praying for you. I am, however, so sick and tired of hearing hypocritical atheists yell up a storm about starving people in the world as if it's God's fault, while simultaneously sitting there doing nothing about it and thus condemning yourselves as part of the problem. You are part of the reason there are starving people in the world. So it's time to put up and shut up. I am laying out this challenge for the Living Dinosaur, as well as all atheists, all Christians, all YouTubers. I don't want to hear another word out of you atheists about this subject, because you have invalidated yourselves from the privilege of saying anything about something you clearly know nothing about, and clearly don't care about. Because if you really cared, you'd be doing something about it. If you'd been doing something about it, you wouldn't be saying such ignorant rubbish as that was spewed forth in Dino's video. It seems the only time you care is if it gives you the opportunity to slander a God you say doesn't exist, or accuse his followers who are actually out there doing something about it. My first challenge is this. I want to see you out there on the front lines feeding hungry people. Go to some foreign country, volunteer with some aid group trying to get food to the world's most needy. Bring your video camera along, document your trip, your story. Interview the aid workers. Interview the people you are helping to feed. Ask them why they are hungry. Ask the aid workers about why, if there's so much food in the world, these people are starving. Put it all together into a video and post it as a video response to this video. Perhaps you just came back from a missions trip. Please share your story in video. Now, I realize many of you just simply cannot go, and that's okay. Although do remember, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there are starving people, even right smack dab in the middle of the land of plenty. Go volunteer at the local soup kitchen or donate food to them. If you can't go, I have a second challenge for you. Support those who do go. I have $100 here. To me, that is a lot of money. I am donating this to the Urdo Relief Fund, affiliated with the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. I am also sponsoring a child monthly through them. In fact, I would highly recommend that as the best way to help needy people. Why? Well, you see, disaster relief usually has no lack. It's good to donate towards disaster relief projects, but the majority of starving people in the world actually live in a land of plenty. They cannot afford food. It's expensive and illogical to ship food to these families in countries that are exporters of food. It's much simpler and cheaper to send money to the needy families. That money you sponsor a child with actually sponsors the whole family. Now, yes, some of that money is used to pay the people who organize this, the aid workers. Well, they need to eat too. They have bills to pay and mouths to feed in their family too. And it is a full-time job for these people just to orchestrate getting money to these needy families. So I have no qualms donating money to the organization for their needs as well. But by sponsoring a child, or many children, you actually support a family. You make a difference for multiple people because they're starving due to lack of money, not lack of food. I'm including a list of organizations at the end. I even included some secular ones for my atheist friends who don't want to support Christian organizations. So please share this video with your friends, your family, your fellow atheists and Christians, and other YouTubers. And maybe make use of the share button down below. I'm going to talk to you all later.